Greetings. Welcome to Harrell Kagler Presents. I am Dr. Jamil Harrell Sims, CEO of Harrell Kagler Innovations Incorporated, and we are Blacknificent. Today is the final episode of our Blacknificent series, and we are focusing on for the day the lost industrial and spiritual technology of ancient Kemet. It's important for us to know our role in the beginning of technology. Make sure that you press that like button, share, family share, like, subscribe, hit the bell so that you can be notified when we put up another show. Today we're featuring our beloved resident scholar, Baba Harold Shujaa Baker, who is the co-founder of the African Restoration Project. He's an engineer with about 30 years of experience, has worked with NASA, done a lot of great work. He also has a couple of websites, one of them dedicated to Kwanzaa. And we also have to mention D-Town. He is a brother from Detroit.
East side?
East side? So without further ado, again, share, like, press the bell, and let's get it popping. Baba Shujaa.
All right. It's good to be here with you again, Dr. J. And we also want to encourage people to comment too, post questions and, let's get a discussion going. I'm going to do my best here to make good use of the time. And so without further ado, I'm going to just share my screen. Let's see there. Are you seeing that okay, Dr. J?
Yes.
Okay. And we get going to the slideshow. So again, the title of today's presentation is The Lost Industrial and Spiritual Technology of Ancient Kemet. It's going to be a book review and a discussion. We're going to be looking at two books that I've sourced for this, and we're going to be going through one of them in more detail than the other, but you'll see it as we go through it. All right. I want to kind of put it in context. We're going to be talking about a discussion about, it's centered around industrial technology, but perhaps the most important element of what we're going to discuss today is the spiritual technology. We're talking about ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, and we want to begin by talking about the way the people engaged the world and what the primary distinctions are between the ancient world and the modern world. Ancient Kemet was known for its moral grounding. It was a civilization that survived for thousands and thousands of years through heights and peaks and valleys and regeneration and all of that. They engaged with a profound respect for the environment. And as a matter of the kings there, the rulers there, were seen to be incarnates of the divine. And each king had a responsibility to restore order or maintain order, or more specifically, Ma'at. Ma'at is an ancient Kemetic system, moral spiritual system that was based around 7 cardinal virtues, which are truth, justice, propriety, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and right order. So I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about that and then give a little bit of insight from one of the texts that we're going to be using. This is coming from the book of Coming Forth by Day, page 32, and this is the translation done by Dr. Maulana Karanga. I'll talk about him a little bit more in a moment. I want to read from that text, and this is the quote. It says, "The shared task of God and humans is one of maintaining Ma'at in the world. This, in turn, means maintaining the creation and the rightness and righteousness of the order this implies and necessitates. Thus, the texts repeat over and over again each king and queen's commitment to restoring, establishing, and expanding Ma'at. It goes further to say that heaven is at peace and earth is in joy, for they have heard the king will set Ma'at in the place of Isfet, which is a word for chaos and disorder. In other words, right in the place of wrong and order in the place of disorder. Ashe to that sacred text reading. The primary text for the spiritual technology component of our discussion is the book of Coming Forth by Day, The Ethics of the Declarations of Innocence by Dr. Maulana Karanga. And that's a translation that he did, I think about 30 years ago, maybe a bit more, directly from the source documents. He didn't go through one of the translations that was done by one of the English or European Egyptologists. He went to the original source text and created his own translation of those documents. So that's a very significant piece of work. Dr. Karenga, as some people will know, is a professor and chair of Africana Studies at Cal State University, Long Beach. He is recognized throughout the world as the foremost exponent of Matian ethical thought, or ancient Kemetic, ancient Egyptian ethical thought, having developed over the last three decades a creative and scholarly Kawaida interpretation of ancient Egyptian ethical thought as a living tradition and a useful philosophical option for critical reflection on the urgent issues of our time. Kawaida is the name of his philosophy, which he defines as Kawaida is the best of African thought and practice in constant exchange with the world. He is perhaps most widely known as the creator of the Pan-African holiday Kwanzaa, and he has had a far-reaching effect on Black intellectual and political culture since the 1960s. So that's the first author and the first book. Our second book, which the technical discussion will be based, is called The Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt. And that is by an engineer by the name of Christopher Dunn. Let's see. And Christopher Dunn, as you see here on this image, is a white man. And though I initially had some concerns about that when I first got into these studies, after hearing him speak and gaining some insight on his motivation and the way he engages this, I have absolutely no problem at all with Christopher Dunn. He spoke about how he doesn't have an agenda like the Egyptologists do. He's only concerned about what the science says, what the evidence says, and he's run into the gauntlet, so to speak, of the established order and their desire to continue forwarding the fallacies about the Great Pyramid. But he comes with an extensive background in engineering. For over 50 years, he worked at every level of high tech manufacturing, from being a machinist and a tool maker to a programmer and operator of high power industrial lasers. He was also a project engineer and laser operations manager. And that came in very handy in this project because he goes into a discussion about lasers that I have not yet wrapped my mind completely around, but nevertheless, scholars who know that discipline have reviewed his information and find it to be credible, plausible. So I'll get into that as we go. His odyssey with the Great Pyramid began in 1977 after he read a book titled Secrets of the Great Pyramid. His immediate reaction after learning of the Great Pyramid's precision and design characteristics was to think that it may have had an original purpose different from what is commonly suggested. And the common suggestion is that the Great Pyramids were tombs, royal tombs, even though, you know, no deceased royalty has ever been found there. After further research and study of source material on various theories, Chris concluded that it must have been originally built to provide a highly technical society with energy. In short, it was a very large machine and, in fact, a power plant. And discovering the purpose of this machine and documenting his case took the better part of 20 years of research, leading to the 1998 publication of the book we're looking at today, The Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt, which describes a holistic energy device that is harmonically coupled with the earth and earth inhabitants. We know that ancient Kemet is the greatest advanced society of antiquity, but we don't know or often think about the power source that fueled such a civilization. The technology of harmonic resonance is the answer, according to Christopher Dunn. And in this book, it's a brilliant piece of reverse engineering based again on his 20 years of research, and it reveals again that the Great Pyramid is an actual power plant. And that's not because he read something, that's because he actually had access to the facility, went in with his precision manufacturing equipment and his expertise, where he was able to see things. And he had other engineers too, it wasn't just him. But as engineers, experienced engineers, they were able to see things in the structure that an archaeologist, you know, would miss, right? So that's what they did. And he explained how the pyramid produced and converted vibration and sound energy to electrical current and potentially microwave radiation and a wireless energy network. The author shows how the pyramid's numerous chambers and passageways were positioned with deliberate precision to maximize its acoustical qualities, explaining perhaps for the first time how every element in the Great Pyramid worked together as part of a functioning machine, and again, not a royal tomb. And I maintain, and it's only reasonable to conclude, that this info is undoubtedly known by some, and they would work to suppress it as they have done, because of course that would require them to give more credit to this society, to those ancient African people, for being an advanced technological society. And of course, they don't want to do that. So they continue this fallacy that nobody understands how the pyramids were built and all of those things, because again, they don't want to acknowledge that electrical technology existed, power machinery, and those types of things that we like to imagine only came into existence in the modern world. Now, I bring actually 35 years, over 35 years of experience in electrical, mechanical, and electromechanical product and system design for a broad mix of applications. My experience includes detailed design, precision manufacturing, first article testing, and installation support. I currently provide consulting services for design and prototype manufacturing. I'm not going to go into everything that I've done, but I just felt the need to give a little bit of background on me so that you can understand how I engage with this book and the information that it shares. So here are a few examples of some of the things that I've worked on over the years. I had a great experience where I designed an examination station for eye exams back in 2006. And then last year I went in to get an eye exam, and there was my eye examination station. So I actually got examined at a station that I designed several years ago. This down here on the lower left is a UV light, ultraviolet light, wastewater treatment system that I helped design. This is one of many kiosks that I've designed. This down here is showing the model of the human on a bed there. That's from design that I did, redesigning one of the treatment rooms at the Proton Cancer Treatment Center at Loma Linda University Hospital. Up here, we have an exploded view of a handheld printer enclosure that I designed. And then here are a couple of products that I offer. One that I offer through my Kwanzaa website, kwanzaa.net. Kwanzaa themed earrings that I designed and manufactured. And then I was manufacturing face masks for a while at the start of the pandemic. I got experience with NASA. I actually may be returning to NASA again here very soon. This was the first shuttle flight experiment I worked on in the early 90s. And this was an electromechanical experiment. The data collected from this experiment went into the design of the power station for the International Space Station that is on orbit right now. So it was a very high profile experiment. And I was the lead mechanical designer. It was an electrical experiment, but I had a primary role in the mechanical system design of that. And this shows a few images of it. Back here in the area at the end of that red arrow there is where our experiment is actually mounted in the exposed cargo bay of the Shuttle Challenger. And then there at the top of that image, that's Earth. You know, that was quite an interesting experience to witness that experiment on orbit and see the Earth like that. That changed my life, actually. Another system I designed, electrical, that relates to the topic today. This was a handheld powder paint gun I designed that created an electrical field. 100,000 volts would be shot out of the tip of that. It would create an electrical field in the front. And the paint is actually just pulverized plastic, you know, a nylon type paint. And it would pass through and it would pick up a charge, and then it would be attracted in an even layer to metal parts that would be that would come in on a grounded conveyor. So those electrical properties worked and made that a very efficient system. And powder paint guns are used for refrigerators, appliances, and office equipment and things like that, where a super smooth finish isn't necessarily required. A few things I did for Walt Disney Imagineering when I was a consultant there in the special effects department. I've designed special effects for Disney parks and attractions all over the world. Did 3D animation for a while. This is a system that I worked on for Diebold Corporation. And then this is my second shuttle flight experiment that I worked on as a consultant for the NASA Glenn Research Center. That was called the Microscale Hydrodynamic Study that was done in conjunction with, again, NASA Glenn Research Center, the Carnegie Mellon University Department of Physics, and my company. And I won't go into that. Most recent assignment was with Calnetics Technologies, where they design medium and high power electric motors and generators and the control equipment that drives them. So that was a good run for me. But coming back to the beginning again, where we're going to begin with the developing and understanding of the spiritual technology or the spiritual attitude that the ancient Kemetu had, the ancient Kemetic people, and the way they engaged, the way they developed science, the ethos that was behind their engagement of science and development of it. Unlike the modern world where the love of money and the profit motive drives everything, that wasn't what drove the ancient Kemetu. They had a desire to advance their society to the highest possible level, but they did that with a profound respect and appreciation for the environment. In other words, for example, the ancient Kemetu would not, under any circumstances, engage in a system where they were burning fossil fuels, because they had a profound and deep understanding of material sciences and environmental sciences and things of that nature, and they would have understood the negative impact that would have. So their approach, as listed in this first quote, was to synthesize the growth of science and technology with the need for human sensitivity and morality, right? They were interested in developing to the highest possible level, but they were constraining themselves, right? Whereas in the modern world, I think it's fair to say that military operations drive a lot of technology development. The quest and desire to kill people, you know, as strange as that is, drives a lot of the technology development here, but that wasn't the case in ancient Kemet. And then here's a quote from the Book of Coming Forth that speaks to the environmental issues we're facing now, in contrast to the focus on maintaining the environment that was the practice in ancient Egyptian, ancient Kemetic, ancient African society. The text says, and I quote, "The world as a common ecological environment is currently under several kinds of pressure, including the problems of pollution of air, water, and soil, and depletion of other natural resources. The threats to the environment not only affect the possibilities of future generations, but the very existence of the world as we know it. Clearly, an ethics that links life in a holistic framework and makes it morally compelling to respect both the social and the natural is needed." And certainly no one should be compelled to argue against that, you know, given the threats to our survival with all of the environmental issues, global warming and those types of things that we're experiencing right now. It also adds that Machian ethics stresses a holistic approach, positing an indestructible unity of the human, divine, and natural. It is, even in its ancient form, committed to a just, good, and righteous order in the social and natural realm. From this, one can evolve a social and environmental ethics, which are interrelated and interdependent. In fact, the obligation to preserve the environment for ourselves and future generations derives from the same ethics to preserve and promote human life and development. For it compels us not to do anything which would deny or diminish the chances for a full and fulfilling life for each and every person. And one of their teachings, because of course they introduced the world, the modern world, to the concept of life after death, eternal life, right? We get that from ancient Kemet. And in that context, in order for a person to be granted eternal life, according to their ethos, according to their spiritual tradition, a person had to be able to stand worthy, not just before the Creator, as we hear in the modern spiritual conversation, but a person had to also be able to stand worthy before other people, and also worthy before the natural world. So if you're one of those people who are out there, you know, don't cut down all of the trees, you know, because you want to make a profit, well, you couldn't stand worthy before nature because you've abused nature, right? So they had a completely different way of engaging with science and technology, and that I maintain, is the single greatest loss from that ancient society. Of course, the industrial technology is a great loss too, and we're going to get into that right now. But that spiritual focus, that ethos, that desire for balance and harmony, not only amongst people, but between people and the environment, was perhaps one of their greatest contributions to the foreflow of human history. This book, The Giza Power Plant, is, as mentioned earlier, a fantastic project of reverse engineering. And we're going to get into all of the elements that are laid out there in some detail, not too much detail, but just enough detail to make this presentation interesting. Some of the things that we're going to be discussing. First, we're going to, at the end, I'm going to get into a simulation of the subterranean pulse generator that's shown here at the bottom of the image. And then, let's see, we have the reaction chamber here, which is also known as the Queen's Chamber. We have the resonant quartzite chamber, which is also known as the King's Chamber. And then we have a microwave signal input and a microwave signal output tunnel. And we have tunnels for hydrated zinc chloride to be sent into the reaction chamber or the Queen's Chamber, and then dilute hydrochloric acid. There is evidence of those chemicals on the facility today, right? So it's not what he read. They did testing on these surfaces and were able to determine that those were the chemicals that were used there. As mentioned, I have an understanding of these concepts presented and the broader ideas suggested, but I want to be clear that I haven't visited the pyramid complex to confirm or deny the evidence found there. I don't think that takes anything away from it though, because the content of the book and the discussions about it are so thorough. And I've read the entire book twice, but I haven't studied it with the repeated reviews and also developing my knowledge of lasers and things which are necessary to really do a critical analysis of the system concept that Christopher Dunn puts forward. But I'm comfortable saying, based on my initial read, my 2 reads of this book and the perspective gained through over 35 years of experience, everything that's put forth here is plausible, even likely, based on the evidence that's there today. But I don't deny that further examination and experimentation is needed, certainly by me. I would like to go there and, do some of the same testing that Christopher Dunn did, and then of course I could speak definitively to what's there from that perspective. So I'm going to do a quick review of what's contained in the chapters without going into too much detail, but again, enough to make it interesting and to convey the message. So in chapter 1 and chapter 2, chapter 1 is titled A New Paradigm, A New Order. And chapter 2 is titled Questions, Discovery, and More Questions. Those 2 chapters review what is known and believed about the pyramids, considered against the evidence surviving there today. This raises many challenges to commonly held beliefs that the ancient Kemetu were technologically limited, or that the pyramids were originally constructed as tombs. Ultimately, these chapters challenge any theory of the pyramid's original intent to include a complete explanation of every structural element remaining, but to also include an explanation for how each element relates to each other. And that's been missing from prior examinations of the pyramid. Where they would talk about the Queen's Chamber is where the Queen was buried, was entombed, and the King's Chamber was supposed to be where the king was, but they never explained the tunnels, and the various components that are there. That didn't explain why would those things be there. What's with the subterranean chamber, and the pulse generator that comes from that? What does that have to do with the tomb? That has never been explained. But again, in his examination of it all, Christopher Dunn explains all of that. In chapter 3, titled Precision Unparalleled, that chapter shatters traditionally held beliefs that the ancient Kemetu were limited to brass and copper tools and coarse manual labor manufacturing with chisels and hammers and things of that sort, right? Dunn shows that the extremely large and heavy granite, quartz, and other hardened stone and metal materials required far more capacity than manual labor alone for the large-scale manufacturing and transport effort required. By inspecting the Great Pyramid as it exists today with modern inspection equipment, Dunn shows incredibly high precision manufacturing techniques were used in their construction, requiring far more than coarse tools and manual labor. At one point, he examines a granite surface, a machined granite surface that was so flat, it was flat to within 1/1000th of an inch across, I think it was a 16 square foot surface, 0.001. What that means is that the entire surface was perfectly flat, only deviating 1/1000th of an inch across the entire surface. That's equivalent to high precision, high grade precision manufacturing today. And this existed thousands and thousands of years ago, right? So that blew all of that away. And I'm not going to go into all of the details that he put forth here, but this is some of the evidence and the discussion of all of these things. And in fact, over here, he is talking about that flatness. And it was actually, let me correct myself, because he did make reference to tolerances of 1/1000th of an inch, but in the example I was just speaking about, it's not 1/1000th of an inch, it's actually 1/100th of an inch flat across an area that was larger than what I recall. It is actually a 35 square foot section, 1/100th of an inch, 0.01 inches. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that level of precision being achieved thousands of years ago and still standing there today, right? So the level of precision is comparable to what we experience today. And in chapter 4, he discusses that. That chapter is titled Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt, and it shows evidence of tool mark patterns consistent with those produced in many of today's large-scale precision manufacturing processes. If you see saw marks, if you see tool marks on it that look like milling marks from today's equipment, you know, that stands out to somebody who is involved in manufacturing today. You know, that's how Chris was able to see that. So again, the tool marks are consistent with those produced in many of today's large-scale precision manufacturing processes. The pyramid stones and surrounding quarries show clear evidence of precision manufacturing requiring sophisticated manufacturing techniques and a power system to drive them. Chapter 5, titled Amazing Discovery at Giza, further examines the precision manufacturing techniques required by examining, again, remaining artifacts. And he discussed some of those. In these sections, he's discussing the manufacturing that was taking place not only at the site of the pyramid, but at the quarries, you know, where they were cutting stones and all of that. So all of that is contained in this example, fully detailed in his presentation. And then these are some of the objects that exist in the pyramid today. And he was making comments, making observations and comments about their precision and about the related characteristics of these objects that would require powered manufacturing. You're not going to get this level of work done with chisels and hammers. It's just not going to happen, right? So he provides all of that information. There's a granite box in the rock tunnel, granite box in the rock tunnels at Saqqara. That's one of the sources of the stones, and they had precision, high-level manufacturing evidence on those objects. And then a contoured block of granite. Granite is one of the harder surfaces. So in order to be able to, we use diamond tip manufacturing equipment, tooling to machine granite these days. So there's no way that they were doing that with bronze tools and chisels and stuff to that and things like that. Chapter 6, titled The Coral Castle Mystery, is one of the most interesting in the book. It addresses long-standing questions about how the ancient Kemetu moved such large blocks of stone across the considerable distances between Giza and the varied quarry sites, and how they were able to lift those stones to the heights required during pyramid construction. Comparisons are made between those required efforts and the efforts of a single man named Edward Lee Scalman, who had a property in Florida. He's now deceased, but he had a property in Florida called the Coral Castle, where he had these huge megalith stones that he was able to move and position single-handedly using principles of magnetics and other techniques that he was reluctant to disclose to anyone. But when people came to the coral castle, at one point of the day, they would observe these huge stones. No one else would be there. There was no equipment there. But come back later in the day, and somehow this man had single-handedly been able to move and reposition these huge stones. So that's a very interesting discussion there. It doesn't relate so much to the electrical properties and things like that, but nevertheless, it speaks to the assembly and the construction processes for the Great Pyramid. And then this is chapter 6, showing all of that discussion and assorted photographs from the Coral Castle, and a discussion about 23-ton blocks, 22-ton blocks, 9-ton blocks, 3-ton blocks that this man was able to move, position, manipulate all by himself.
Wow.
And then he gets into, he has figures that introduce the discussion about all of the principles of physics that are involved here. And, you know, so much of it is magnetics. Electromagnetic energy is the foundation of life in so many ways. We human beings are electromagnetic machines ourselves. I could attach a very sensitive voltmeter to myself, and I could detect a voltage running through my body right now that would be affected by my proximity to other electrical systems. You know, so if I were sitting here in my office, but, you know, where I'm not surrounded by much, I would have a very minor voltage running through my system. But if I walked into the kitchen, turned on the microwave, turned on the lights, and surrounded myself with other electrical appliances, my body would react to the electromagnetic energy in my space, and I would have a higher voltage pulsing through my body. And these aren't high voltages, these are microvolts, but nevertheless, they are detectable. And they speak to the reality of human beings as electromagnetic systems. So when they were dealing with this electrical energy and these properties back then, it wasn't just for the purpose of producing electrical power to drive the society. They also used that to aid the human person, right? We've gotten completely away from an understanding of ourselves as electrical beings. We go to the doctor, there's never any discussion about our electrical system. But the ancient Egyptians had an understanding of that, and they were able to use this energy for healing purposes, right? So that's another version of the technology that's been lost, but it's all based on electromagnetics, earth properties, vibrations, frequencies, all of those things we'll talk about a little bit. Chapter 7, titled Endeavoring to Explain the Enigma, summarizes the open questions, while chapter 8, titled The Giza Power Plant, engages the power plant theory in detail. This chapter introduces the science, physics, and engineering principles I want and need to examine further to gain a greater command of what Dunn proposes from a systems level. I'm not a physicist, and all of this is grounded in physics. So in order for me to completely wrap my mind around this, I have to do like I do when I get on a new project. I have to study the related science, the related technology, and develop a familiarity with it that would allow me to do my work. So in this instance, when the opportunity presents, I will focus some time and energy on studying this so that I can gain a better understanding of it. In fact, it is my ultimate goal within the next 10 years. And I have to think in terms of 10 years. Perhaps I would do it in 5, but I would like to create a functional simulation, a scaled functional simulation of the pyramid, you know, to give a visual life-size representation of how it operated. And we'll get to that at some point. You see, and I mentioned that here, as we do in our systems development in my work life, we always create a model or a prototype to test what we propose our design or system will do. So I'm definitely looking forward to doing that. And then this is text from chapter 8, where he's describing what's going on there. And then here he's giving some images, again, showing how all of these different principles come together, talking about seismic waves and how that energy is used and converted, right? Talking about the magnetic fields and how that's at the foundation of everything that's happening there, and speaking about the piezoelectric effect. That's where you have and they were great material scientists too in ancient Kemet. materials like granite, under a vibration, if they're exposed to a vibration, that material releases electrons. That's called the piezoelectric effect. And those same materials are used in speakers and in microphones today for that very purpose. And the energy conversions that we're talking about taking place there in the pyramid is part of the modern world. It's part of this very moment, in fact, because the conversions from vibration to sound and then to electricity, we're doing some of that right now. You're hearing my voice through speakers. My voice is being captured through a microphone. The microphone is taking sound energy from my voice and converting that to electricity. The speakers are taking electrical energy and converting that to sound energy. So these types of conversions are happening all the time and have been happening for a considerable period of time. So that part of what's being presented here is no mystery, right? These documents, these pages, he shows the precision location of the pyramids and how they are positioned to align with the center of Earth's landmass. I mean, we've heard discussions about the precision alignment of the pyramids before, so that portion of it is nothing new. But for the pyramids to be aligned with the center of Earth's landmass, that's a significant point to consider. And it's something that they didn't get to accidentally. They had to have some advanced knowledge to be able to compute that. And that's been verified again in the modern world, right? And then some of the angles and things that they use and its relationship to the pi factor and all of those other high-level mathematical computational considerations that we apply in the modern world today. They were applying those in the ancient world too. Resonance and harmonics. Speaking about that and how the pyramid was described as a coupled oscillator that draws energy from the source as long as the source continues to vibrate. In other words, it was drawing vibration energy from the earth and some that was induced there in the subterranean chamber. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it was taking that energy and it would come in vibration energy, it would come in as sound energy, and all of that was captured and converted for the purposes of the pyramid. Chapters 9 through 11, titled The Mighty Crystal, An Amazing Maser, and a Hydrogen Generator, go further into the science and physics to explain how vibration energy is captured and converted from sound and how that energy applies a force upon quartz crystals present in the upper pyramid or the king's chamber, which is activated by a hydrogen generator catalyst in the lower queen's chamber to create electricity to power ancient Kemetic civilization. This systems level conception, where all elements are explained based on surviving artifacts and evidence, again, is far more viable as an explanation for the ultimate purpose of the Great Pyramid than a tomb, because again, it explains every element. Let's see. And then these images show, let's see, it's showing, these were his theories about grand gallery resonators that existed in the now empty grand gallery. What is a resonator? A resonator converts, it alters sound. It's part, these resonators would have been part of the sound conversion effect that was taking place within the walls of the pyramid. And these are diagrams showing his theories about how these items were once there in the original construction. And of course, you know, granite and stone, those elements, those materials survive for millennia. Metals, not so much, you know, so those things aren't there anymore. But nevertheless, based on what is there, he found evidence to support their presence. And then, and I don't want to go into all of these details because some of these things, admittedly, I don't fully understand, but this is an image showing his perception of elements that existed in the king's chamber, coming right out of the grand gallery, and then also some acoustic filters or some sound filters that existed right outside the door, the entrance to the king's chamber. ultimately, what's happening up in the king's chambers was called a microwave amplifier, a 3-stage microwave amplifier. And I'll discuss that a little bit more when I'm showing the image of that. And let me see. Maybe go back for a second. Go back to that. Okay, and this image is showing the power center in the king's chamber and showing where the microwave receiver and the power output happened outside of this tunnel going to the left of it, showing those resonators and showing those acoustic filters right outside of it. And then this is a discussion about the pyramid maser. And I must admit, this is the portion of the system that I'm least familiar with. A maser is in some way related to lasers, and I still have to wrap my mind around that portion of it. But that's, again, Christopher Dunn's expertise. So he brought expert level understanding of masers to this conversation and explained how, based on that knowledge, how the elements existing there are aligned specifically with that type of equipment. Here again, showing the Queen's Chamber. The Queen's Chamber was a hydrogen plant. They were introducing chemicals into that facility through tunnels, where, as I mentioned earlier, here on the left, it's showing that hydrated zinc chloride was being funneled in from that side, and hydrochloric acid was coming in through the opposite side, and that they created a chemical process that produced hydrogen. Hydrogen is a flammable gas. So that was part of the system level operation, and I'll talk about that when I get to the full view of the pyramid when I come back to that. Chapters 12 through 15 include a fascinating discussion on evidence of catastrophic failure in the power center or the King's Chamber, resulting from a hydrogen-induced explosion that pushed the monstrous stones of the chamber walls out of their original alignment by a full inch symmetrically. You're able to see where the stones originally were, and they had been backed up an inch. And the evidence, it wasn't just the movement, there was charring inside of that facility, inside of that space that provided evidence that a major explosion had happened there, which offers some insight perhaps on the fall of civilization there. If this was in fact the pyramid, the power plant that it appears to be, and there was a catastrophic failure, well, that could lead to civilization collapse. Just like if our power grid were to fail today, all types of bad things would go on, right? But there's evidence in the King's Chamber of a catastrophic failure and a hydrogen explosion. These chapters summarize the findings put forth by Dunn and explain his overall system thesis. These chapters also revisit evidence that ancient Kemet harnessed the power of electricity for practical purposes. And it closes with a discussion of how the evidence found at the Giza complex today disputes or renders meaningless current and previously held assumptions about the purpose and function of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Specifically, the argument that these were tombs, that's just blown out of the water. There's absolutely no reason to continue forwarding that fallacy based on what is still standing in the pyramid today. And then the evidence of electricity being harnessed there is captured throughout the civilization, right? There are very famous wall carvings on the wall carvings at the Dendera Temple, showing, as we see here, what looks like a light bulb with the power source right there on the right end of it, and an electrical cord, an extension cord connected to them, right? That once that was examined, it was determined that those were in fact light bulbs, and that they are based on a similar technology to what's called a Crookes tube. That is part of the modern world. We use those in the modern world. But that technology is parallel to what's called a Crookes tube. And then there's a suggestion that one of the ways that they diminish the people around this is by suggesting that all of this technology was handed to them by aliens, and that they were communicating with aliens, that the microwave radiation that was ejected from the pyramid was supposedly communicating with extraterrestrial beings looking for Earth, looking for intelligent life out in the universe or something to that effect, saying whatever they need to say to try to diminish the people, right? But what's really more plausible is that this was a wireless power network, that they were connected to other pyramids at other points in the country and around the world, right? There's evidence to support that. I could get into a longer discussion about Nikola Tesla and the patents that he earned on wireless technology. I could talk about how because Nikola Tesla, for those who aren't familiar with him, he's one of the modern geniuses, one of the greatest geniuses of our time. But he was also a student of ancient Kemet. So when he took out, when he claimed filed patents for a wireless energy system, it's been suggested that those were just thoughts that he conceived, but it's quite likely that he got some indication of that from his access to the texts and teachings from ancient Kemet, right? There's no doubt about that. But in any case, there's no doubt that the ancient Kemetu had electricity, that they had light bulbs, So this is nothing new. Now, I'm going to show this video, which is a functional simulation of the subterranean pulse chamber. And that was done by a marine engineer by the name of Chris Cadman. I think I actually want to go back before I show that video. I want to go back to one of the other images early on where I showed the full image with all of the components labeled. So let me show that. I might need to just X out of this and go back instead of flipping through each one. I won't flip through each one on the way back. But in any case, this is where I want it to be. Down here in the subterranean pulse generator, what was happening, to give a quick summary of the system, they would feed water into the subterranean pulse generator, and that water, it was 330 feet down, and that water would flow past a very large valve that would open and close with the flowing of the water. And with each closure, it would slam into the bottom of the pyramid. And that would be like inducing a vibration, sort of like, an earthquake type of effect. And that energy would resonate throughout the facility. And up here in the resonite quartzite chamber, those vibrations would interact with the material up there, produce an electrical current that would then interact with the hydrogen that was being produced in the reaction chamber here, or the Queen's chamber. And then that would create an ignition here inside of the King's chamber that would lead that microwave power output through a tunnel out of the side. So let me go back down and I'll show this video now. This is a video that was done again by a marine engineer by the name of John Cadman. And he didn't do a full model of it. Matter of fact, I should have sold my own model because I started preparing my own model of it. I'll show that before it's over. But I wanted to show this, and I'll try to talk through it maybe as we show it. But it's showing how it does a cross section, and it's showing the Queen's chamber here, the pulse generator. These yellow lines are indicating the pulse that was happening. And then this is the water that is flowing into the subterranean pulse generator, or the subterranean pulse chamber. And there is a valve down here that would slam into the bottom of the pyramid, right, with the flow of the water. And again, as I mentioned, with the hydrogen generator happening here, you would have that electricity generated in the King's chamber, and then through the flow of that hydrogen up to the King's chamber from the Queen's chamber, you would get ignition and you would get a charge of electricity that went outside that went through that tunnel. Let me see. Let me go to, I'm going to stop this share so that I can share the screen of my own pyramid model that I'm working on. I told you all I'm gonna get doing my own model of this, my own simulation of this at some point, but this is the beginning of it here. And this isn't completely, the pyramid is to scale, but I didn't put all of these other features in here to scale yet. But this is the beginning of my simulation right here, where I've constructed this. And again, it shows the pulse generator down here at the bottom and the passageways. This is the grand gallery right here where those resonators were. Then this is the King's chamber up here. This is the Queen's chamber. This is the port where they brought in the, what was it? The hydrochloric acid from the left. They brought in the hydrated zinc from the right. And then here, going out this way, was where the pulse, where the energy would be projected. So I wanted to share that. You see, stop share on that. And then I'm gonna go back to this last video. I wanted you all to have the opportunity to hear Christopher Dunn in his own words, giving covering some of the info that I've shared here, but I thought it was important for everybody to hear him speak about this. So, and this is about a 5-minute video. How are we doing on time? I think we're okay.
We actually only have 4 minutes left. So,
well, if we go over 1 minute, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, because let me just get into this.
But a hydrogen explosion in the King's chamber would have caused that particular event. And if we go back, to when that event happened, I think you can point to points in time or time period where there were cataclysmic changes, comet impacts or the like, where the Great Pyramid was not able to handle a huge influx of energy, and it literally shook apart. So before 2001, this is a photograph of the ceiling of the Grand Gallery, and then in 2001, after the pyramid had been closed for several months, everybody was claiming that Hawass was digging a tunnel from his bathroom over to the top of the Queen's chamber, and other skullduggery. But they actually had cleaned it, and it was obvious, because if you look at the ceiling, you have these scorch marks, and funnily enough, they're placed. The placement of them, or the location of them, is directly above the slots where I theorized that the resonators were held. So that's a close-up of that. So that came after the book was published, but it's something that will be included in my next book, because an update is planned. When I first had the Giza power plant published, a lot of people would say, well, when are you going to write your next book? And I said, well, when I have something to write about, I'll write another book. And it was like, 12 years. Then I got the Lost Technologies published. And now 21 years later, I'm getting back in the saddle and going to write a sequel to the Giza power plant, because there's a lot of information that has come forward that I think is very important. So anyway, as far as the function of the pyramid, in 2016, I reached out to an acoustic engineer, Robert Water, because I felt that there was one part of my book that could be fleshed out a little more, and that was on the internal acoustics and the movements of sound inside the Great Pyramid. So he came, I organized a trip for 2018, and we talked off and on, and he was actually doing research on the acoustics, and had quite a lot of information that I could use. But one thing that we wanted to actually was an authorized study, something that we would have to, apply to the Supreme Council of Antiquities, work through a university, have a PhD lead, and So we did an exploratory mission to Egypt in 2018, and we were blessed with a tremendous amount of support by Mohammed, by the new director of the Giza Plateau, Ahmed Al-Gindi, both beautiful guys, absolutely wonderful personalities. And very much believe that the Great Pyramid was the tomb of Khufu. However, they love to learn more about the science of the pyramid. And I think it's kind of creeping into their consciousness, especially when they're looking at the manufacturing technology of the ancients, that there was something more going on. So while they still believe that Khufu is buried there, and they're still looking for his burial chamber, they're open to the idea that, at least those that I talk to, are open to the idea that maybe the burial occurred after, and a previous culture actually with a greater set of tools and techniques and knowledge.
So he was just closing out by saying again that this was no tomb, and if there was a burial that happened there, it happened after the original construction, you know, and it wasn't done by the people who created the pyramid originally. Let me see. So that was the bulk of the discussion. I wish I had more time. I did a 2-hour presentation on this before, where I got to go into much more detail, but I wanted to introduce it. I wanted to make that critical connection between the spiritual technology and the industrial technology, because of course that ethos, the change in the ethos, the change in the value system, the distinction in the value system between ancient Kemet and the modern world, that represents the greatest distinction between ancient society and modern society. Our technology is not so different, you know, but there is a profound difference in the spirit of the modern world compared to the ancient world, you know, which explains why, you know, societies collapse after a couple hundred years, right? As opposed to ancient societies that survive for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So that was the info that I wanted to share. I thought it was important that we have an understanding that, you know, we are not just consumers of modern technology. We're not just targets or victims of modern science. We are innovators and creators of it. And if we come to understand ourselves again in our fullest, then we will restore an understanding of ourselves at that level and begin to, and again, on a greater level, because we're already doing it, but we're not doing it at the level that we need to. We will again become leaders in the world for science and technology and all of those related things. And also, you know, for morality and ethics, because that's all in us too.
Well, I want to say it's important for us, and I know the language, the technology, it's very foreign to many people, because we tend to gravitate more towards, some of us, not all of us, gravitate more towards entertainment and sports and maybe business, and we need more of that to gravitate towards medicine. And with STEM and STEAM, it's very important to get in, even though there are entities that try not to let us in or close the door on us or pretend that we have nothing to do with it. Brother Shujaa has just proven and given the receipts that we have everything to do with it from the very beginning. And if your child, or if you yourself have an interest, out of high school, I went to a community college for a short time, and then I was a student at Northrop University in electrical and robotics engineering. I don't tell many people that. People from back then know that I was a student at Northrop University, and I was the only highly melanated female in the whole program. Yeah. I was it. Everyone else was from the Middle East, another country. We had like 3 or 4 brothers, but everybody else was either from another country or they were white. And so being the only Black woman in that class, I was told that my role was to the kitchen and the bedroom. That was told to me by my professor, who my whole class surprisingly confronted him about what he said to me and how he treated me. And so that was a bad experience for me, but that was during a time when Rockwell, Hughes, Aircraft, Boeing, Lockheed, that was during that time. Yeah. So what I want to say in closing is, if you have a child that has an interest in engineering, technology, please push them in that direction. Let them learn, because in the end, technology is not going to get smaller, it's going to get bigger. Yeah. And we have to be able to, if we're going to do for self, we need to have our brothers and sisters involved in this specific career.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me say this on behalf of all of the male engineers working out there all over the world in engineering projects. We want more sisters. We want more sisters. So we certainly need to steer our young men into STEM and STEAM fields, but the future is wide open for women who can come in, because it is a boys' club, and what you experience is how they go about isolating us, keeping us out of that, because men aren't necessarily welcome with open arms everywhere either. Black men aren't welcome with open arms in the discipline either. But certainly there's an aversion to women, period, not just Black women, but women, period. But I know I can speak for the engineers out there. We want more sisters working arm in arm or side by side with us on these projects, because there's an energy that sisters bring to the project that every project needs. So be encouraged, and don't allow all of that fear-inducing and fear of math and all of that stuff to stop you, because you got it in you.
Absolutely. And if I had the support, that was during the 80s, and I didn't have the support. And if I had more support, I would have finished that program. I did not have it. It's not that they didn't know how to give it to me. And again, being there were other females, they were from China, but very few. Yeah. So I encourage, if that's what you're into, make sure that's what you want. Yeah. Because if you don't want it, you're doing it for someone else, you're not going to finish the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me say this in closing, because I think this is pertinent. If we had an understanding that our ancestors had been so technologically advanced, then that would have a lot to do with our attitude walking towards this stuff. Mm-hmm. If you had that understanding, then that would have propelled you, through some of the confusion that you had to deal with, because you would have understood, known without question that it's within you. Because as my Honorable Marcus Garvey taught us, people have done what people can do. So if we have an understanding that our ancestors were the creators of modern science and technology, then that would inform our understanding of what we can do at a much higher level.
Absolutely. And if I had that information at the time that he succeeded, because I didn't have the support. Yeah. But I have to say, and really shocking coming from men from the Middle East who have a different ideology and perspective on women, they supported me, but the support I needed was bigger than that. Yeah. And I had a close friend who was like an older brother who was top of his game at USC, and he helped me with the formulas. And that professor could not understand how I got it right. Yes, I had hours and hours of tutoring and trig, hours and hours of it for me to understand it and comprehend it. But nonetheless, I put forth the effort. So I would say that was my experience at an early age, 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, 21. That was my experience. But today, and that school is no longer there, but today, if you have an interest in technology, you can reach Brother Shujaa. You can go to his website. Tell him the website.
My company website is Virtual Design and Prototyping. My website is VD and P for Virtual Design and Prototyping.com. My Kwanzaa theme website I mentioned earlier is Kwanzaa.net. So both of those are available, but my work is on vdnp.com.
Absolutely. So I'm going to end it with this, brother. I want to thank you for giving us this presentation. Very informative, high caliber. Asante sana to you. Thank you for being here with us. And I will end with what I always do before share, comment. I know you have some questions about this. We're here about those comments. Forever forward, never backwards.
Never backwards.
Peace. Salam. Hotep.
Ashe.
Ashe.